The population was steadily up near 18,000. Winter events that attracted thousands to the area were a regular occurrence, and the Berlin Maroons and Notre Dame Rams were the toast of the region. But economic troubles were just around the corner for the jewel of the North Country. The late 60s saw urban renewal come to the city, but it would never live up to the promise of attracting more businesses to the area.
At the time, we didn't care for it too much. We thought it was a waste of government money. People weren't given the true value of the homes. My parents' home was valued at about $20,000, and they only got about $7,000 for the house from the federal government, and they had no choice. They had to move out quickly and find another home. The opinion at the time was it took away a lot of good tax-paying property, property that was bringing in tax income for the city of Berlin. But the prediction was that what was going to replace it was going to bring in more taxes for the city. Of course, that didn't work out for a long, long time.
In 1968, the Brown Company was sold to Gulf Western, and the first reduction in the workforce took place, shrinking from almost 3,000 down to 1,600. The population began to slip as well, and by 1970 had fallen to about 15,000 from its peak of 20,000 back in the 1930s. Like in many other industrial cities across America, the recession of the 1970s hit hard, and Berlin soon saw its fortunes change for the worse. New EPA regulations began to cost the paper industry millions of dollars, cutting into profits and forcing more reductions in the workforce. The downward spiral had begun, and in 1972, the Catholic Church closed Notre Dame High School due to the shrinking student population.
That was a sad day when they decided to close Notre Dame High School, because it really changed the aesthetics of our community. I believe that firmly and strongly.
The beloved community club would close in 1973. And as the population began to leave, so did the small businesses on Main Street. And the once vibrant heartbeat of the city began to fade as storefronts were boarded up and closed. The Converse Rubber Company, which had thrived since the 1940s, closed in 1979, dealing another hard economic blow to the city.
After Converse Granite State Division closed, and of course more people moved out. And it was, we knew everybody, and like I worked in stitching, so it was mostly women. We brought up our kids together, and it became like a social thing. We had our parties and all that. We knew our bosses. We saw them all the time. They were like our neighbors. I missed the girls a lot after it closed down, because we were family.
Bass Shoes made an attempt to bring the shoe industry back to Berlin, opening a factory in 1981, but it would close in less than 5 years. In 1980, the James River Company purchased the mill and began to sell off the thousands of acres of woodlands owned by the original Brown Company. The workforce was reduced once again, and major portions of the production were shipped out of the country to places like Mexico, while wood crews were eliminated and major segments of the mill's work was subcontracted. In 1994, another company, Crown Vantage, was spun from the James River Corporation, further reducing the workforce.
In 1979, the Brown Company was bought by James River Corporation. In summers of 1981 and 82, when I was in college, I worked there, and you could see a lot of the computerization starting to take place, the mechanization. But I remember them saying, this is going to be eliminating a lot of people's jobs. And that's when a lot of us started saying, I guess that's what progress is all about. by the mid-'80s, people were starting to see that the paper company, the paper industry, was starting to become challenged. By the mid-'90s, there was talk about the mills closing. And the sad thing was, one of the corporate policies at the time, not only for James River but for Crown Vantage, was let's blame the workers, let's blame the workforce. They're not productive enough. The sad thing was that they were productive, and they really gave an honest day's work for whatever job they did at the mills. The sad thing is that the global economy had already caught up with Berlin. I remember a lot of us, buying James River toilet paper and seeing "Made in Mexico" on the wrappers. And a lot of us would just be in disbelief and just asking ourselves, why is this happening? We used to make everything here. The Nybrock towels, the toilet paper. I mean, we did everything here. But because of globalization and the need for profits because of the stockholders, they started moving a lot of their operations down to Mexico. And when you start seeing something like that, it doesn't take long to realize that the writing's on the wall. And that was the beginning of the end.
By this time, the population of Berlin had shrunk to about 10,000, half the size of its 1930s heyday. The city was becoming a shell of its former self, and the pulp mill, the very business that stood as the pillar of the community, was about to close forever.
It was going to be our night, that the end of production was going to be on our shift. So we had talked before about getting the last sheet off the production line and getting everybody to sign it that was in the mill that night. So they finally called me and said, "Joe, we just shut the dryer down, the last sheet came off." So we pulled it. I had the guys sign the sheet. We dated it, and then we went and took it to all of the other departments so that everybody that was in the mill that night would sign it as a piece of history, the end of an era. It was not a happy time, but I must say that the crews were all very professional in doing their jobs. They knew that the end was near, that that was it, that they were part of history of Berlin, and that was the last sheet coming out. There would be no more, and that shortly down the road they would be out of work and unemployed. They were also very professional about it. They could have, gone off the deep end and done a lot of things, but they didn't. They just stayed the straight and narrow. They all did their work. They knew it was going down. They drained the tanks like they were supposed to. They shut everything in an orderly manner, and were very professional about it. So no, I can only praise those people and the crews, because they're the ones that really made it. It wasn't myself or Roland Lamontagne or anybody else. It was them. They had a lot of pride in this mill.
A lot of them ended up going to southern New Hampshire, getting jobs in construction sites where it's seasonal work, so which I'm doing right now. A lot of people are traveling. They leave on Monday morning early and do their job, 410s or 5/8s, whatever, and then they come back on Friday and they're here on the weekends, and because they still have their house over here. It's tough for these people because they have to maintain a job, and and to try to find a job too. Right now with me, I'm lucky my wife works at Car Freshener, which we have insurance. Otherwise than that, no insurance, and at the age of 52, for me, that's a tough position to be in.
There were some that, myself included, we took jobs that took us up to Woodland, Maine, 300 miles away, working construction. It was just, you did what you felt you had to do to support your family. Some people found work locally, but there were a lot of guys and girls that had to travel a distance to work.
it was always the mill is never going to close, so no one needs to worry. And then when it did happen, it was overwhelming for everyone. It was unbelievable. And then to realize that you have to find a new career at 40, some 50, some even 60 is just devastating.
I'm getting older and, you know, they're looking for younger people. So we'll just hang on and take it day by day, see what happens.
I've seen guys really get depressed when the mill shut down, especially the unskillful ones. I was one of the lucky ones. I had a skill, you know. I had a welding background, so I was able to get out in industry and get a job right off. Some other people, some of the paper makers and you know, like laborers, whatnot, didn't have any kind of skill, so it was tough on them. And now I'm currently a welding instructor at the Berlin High School, local high school here in Berlin. Yeah, so, and I also instruct a welding instructor for the community college, White Mountains Community College here in Berlin also.
I've been at the college for 26 years. When the mill closed down, the college, along with outside agencies, partnered and developed training programs for the individuals who wanted to retrain and find new careers. We have helped a number of people from the mill, and they have gone on to new careers and are very happy. Change is not easy, and they've faced many challenges, both financially, personally, and academically. And so we've helped them and guided them through all of those, and to see them graduate is quite a reward.
You know, families for years and years and years went to the mill, ran their whole career, and now that's not true anymore for the most part, so they've had to reinvent themselves. The mill, what it did for the town and for people is taught them good work ethic. And from there, they were able to get other jobs because of their work ethic. So I think that's important, that Berlin, people aren't afraid to work, and they work hard, and that's part of the culture here is the blue-collar, hard-working families. And so they were able to, whether they have to travel to Conway or to Littleton or to Nashua or Concord, wherever it may be, Portland, Maine, they land jobs because of the good work ethic, and they can do a number of things. And the mill was good about teaching people a number of different skills, so that if it did close, you can move on and find another job if that's what you choose to travel. And if you choose to pick up and leave, then you do that too.
It was the bread and butter for most families in Berlin. It was the wives and children who worked in the restaurants and grocery stores, but the men, it was their bread and butter, it was their life, and very dependent on the mill.
As the 20th century came to a close, Berlin's future was in doubt. When the pulp mill was finally sold to a demolition company in 2006, the centerpiece of this once proud city was torn down, forcing the population to face the reality that the paper industry would no longer be the foundation of its social and economic fabric.
It was difficult times here in Berlin. The paper mill changed hands 4 or 5 times over the last 20 years. And every time that the paper mill changed hands, there was always that hope that was going to continue and continue to provide good employment for lots of people. But
you can still hear the mill. It's almost like a ghost of the mill there. That's how I feel anyway when I walk by there. It's like, listen, you can still hear the mill. Even if it's not there, you can still hear it. Isn't that cool?
At the beginning of the 20th century, Berlin's forefathers created an industrial city through sweat and an honest day's work. Now, 100 years later, the people of Berlin will have to summon that same grit and determination in order to save it. with the legacy of the Brown Company and all that it brought to the city. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Berlin's mill workers, farmers, dairymen, and shopkeepers have begun to craft their future, looking to build a new sense of purpose for Berlin and bring a renewed vitality to the city that trees built.
What has to be captured is the hard work of the people that kept this community together as long as it did. We have people who worked hard in the mills, who had a lot of pride in their work and wanted their children to have better than what they had, and that's what my parents wanted for me.
You know the old saying, what goes around comes around? I believe that, I really do. And it'll go around, and somebody else will come in and start something else, and that'll click. Somebody else will click, another click. One thing you know, it'll start all over again. And you can only hope and pray that this will materialize, because it has to. It really, really has to. And we can only keep our fingers crossed and hope and pray for the best.
I am eternally optimistic. I see a Main Street at this point that is bruised. I see a Main Street that is struggling with a very, very challenging economy right now. But I also see a very strong and diligent core of entrepreneurs who are very much interested in seeing the Main Street continue.
Every street corner, every street, every area that I go through has good memories for me. And there are a lot of ghosts here that I feel very comfortable with. When I sit in my office on the second floor at the sawmill, I look out over the cemetery and I see the grave of my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and my 5 uncles, all within sight. And that's a kind of, some people would find that morbid, but I don't, it's a testimony to the fact that people have stayed here and put their lives into this community, and it's been rewarding for them.
Berlin is my home. I mean, no matter where I go or what I do, if I go back there, it's just that sense of home. I'm hopeful for the future of Berlin. I think it's had a rough time, but I do think that there's enough people up there who really want to bring Berlin back to the life that it was.
It's a especially friendly town with really an awful lot of really good people, wonderful people. And I have been privileged to know a lot of these people that are, some I've lost, but some are still here. They're still a lot younger than I, but they're still, you know, it's been my privilege to live here.
It's just nice to be associated with a community that your family has had so much to do with over the years. Because like in our particular case, both of my sets of grandparents came from Canada to find a new life, and they did. And they afforded us this ability to be here and to have that life. And I think we all, and each in our own way, we all feel we have a stewardship to be able to prolong that and to make it, even though it's not as good as it would have been at one point, we've always been optimistic. And we always say, well, today maybe wasn't the greatest day, but tomorrow it'll get better. And I think that's one of the things I like about Berlin is its optimism. We've always been optimistic that even though yesterday wasn't as good as it could have been much worse. And tomorrow will definitely be a better day. And if we can make our town such that we can keep it as a haven for future generations, we're all committed to that.
But we were strictly French. My grandfather could not speak a word of English, so that made us speak more French. And I went to the Guardian Angel School where Judy wasn't going, and like she said, it was mostly French through the whole day and stuff. And we grew up on the East Side, and everybody knows the best hockey players came from the East Side. I have to throw that in.
And the words to the Norwegian national anthem are some of the most beautiful words of any national anthem. Not just because it's Norwegian, but because it talks about the homeland. Ja, vi älskar detta landet som det stänger fram. Yes, I love this land, my country, land of home and kin. And then it goes on and talks about hem de mor or far, the home of my mother and father.
My skinny was digging the puck out of the corner. There was a couple guys there, and I would come out with the puck.